listening to or watching our review of She-Hulk Attorney at Law Season 1, Episode 8, Ribbit and Rip It. I'm Dan Gavazdan, filling in for David Chen, and he's Siddhant Adlaka. Siddhant, Episode 8 finally delivers on the much-anticipated Daredevil team-up that I think there's a large number of fans who are checking into She-Hulk just to see this guy show up. And we got the tease of the helmet, and here we got the full thing. What'd you think of this whole Daredevil and She-Hulk team-up episode that we got here, which weirdly is named after Leapfrog? I would have thought maybe you'd put Daredevil in the title of the episode, but yeah, what'd you think overall about this one?
First of all, what an interestingly structured show. She keeps saying it's her show, but first it's Bruce Banner that draws people in, and then it's Wong, and then it's like 16 Daredevil teases, and then he finally shows up. So hopefully, they'll be able to sell the episode on the back of She-Hulk herself next week. Hopefully. But yeah, no, I enjoyed this episode much more than I thought I would. I haven't always been the biggest fan of the Netflix Daredevil. But I was glad to see that even though, theoretically this is that same Daredevil from that same continuity, it's a tonal approach that I love so much more. It feels a lot more in line with a lot of the Daredevil comics that I like. And what I think suits this version is that, yeah, he's quippy and he has a lot of banter, but not in like this sort of overwrought, forced way that I think a lot of Marvel stuff tends to suffer from. Like, you get that? Blah, blah, blah. He's just a straight, like, he's funny, but he's also just like very natural. And I think that's a testament to how good Charlie Cox is in this version of the role, and I really want to see more of him. Like, I wasn't all that interested in Born Again until this week's She-Hulk. Born Again, as in the Daredevil
really
show that's coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited for Born Again, even though we literally have no idea what the creative forces behind it are, unless that's been announced and I missed it somehow. It's Born Again is probably my favorite Marvel Comics story they've ever published, and it's so dark. So I kind of expected it to be more in line with the first 3 seasons of Daredevil, but I like you. I really liked this balance here. Like, it definitely allows him to go dark. Like, there's a sequence, a hallway fight sequence, which I'm sure was done intentionally, where it suddenly becomes Batman again. And like, I like that you can have the kind of bounce back and forth between him cracking jokes and beating up thugs in a menacing style. I thought it was a lot of fun. And you're right. Charlie Cox I think he's one of the best cast characters in the MCU. Which I'm sure there was I feel like the Netflix shows were pretty well cast overall, but I think he really stands out. And my wife would definitely agree. She just watched the episode, and I'm pretty sure I got to watch out for Charlie Cox in real life, because he's got a certified hall pass. And you know what? I don't blame her, because I might get a hall pass for Charlie Cox. I mean, dude is charming.
You got to be careful. If he's got a hall pass, he might start a fight in the hallway. So just be careful.
Yeah. So that's there's some kind of BDSM association there. You know what? Probably best we don't talk about that.
No, I think we should get into it.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know how public I'm willing to go on these shows, but yeah, anyway, so, yeah, I like this episode too. I still think that this show kind of struggles with its, episode structure and how it wants to balance ongoing arcs with, self-contained stories. But, for the first 2/3 of this episode, I was just kind of enjoying myself. I think the stuff, again, like I said in the last episode, that entertains me more is the flirtatious single Jen stuff.
Yeah.
And I was at first very happy with the lawyerly stuff here, but I acknowledge, looking back on it, that the lawyering was really being driven by Matt Murdock rather than Jen. And it just continues to communicate to me that I think the writers of the show aren't interested in the lawyer element of the show and are really just
Hmm.
using it as a way to get her on other adventures in dating or beating up crooks. Because like even here, Jen loses on a technicality, not like on anything related to the law, other than the fact that this guy lied about what jet fuel he put into his boots.
Yeah.
And so it's like they really don't seem interested in that, and so therefore I'm not really interested in that. But in that the episode moves on from it very quickly, it allowed me to kind of like go, okay, I'm kind of into this episode.
Yeah, the law in general, I think apart from maybe, the Donny Blaze episode, it feels just as like the law is an excuse to manufacture other conflicts. And I don't use manufacture necessarily in a negative way. Let's just assume it's value neutral for now. It's a way to bring you elsewhere in the story. It's a way to get you from one situation to the next. If there's, if the courtroom itself serves a purpose, it's usually, either to set up something else or to have a few fun jokes. So in that sense, it's unlike a lot of the comics we've been reading. But like you said, the flirtatious element, the dating element is, fairly interesting and fairly fun. And I think this week especially, this is the first, well, it's the first time Jen is like, you know met or hooked up with a guy who turns out not to be, a total asshole. I mean, apart from like the guys he beats up. um but it yeah, like you really feel the chemistry there.
Yeah.
Like it And I think a lot of that is owed to how Charlie Cox handles the humor. It's not like the me dumb guy, which is slowly becoming like the lingua franca of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Thor and Star Lord, and all that. Beyond the point of like the same characters now. But this, he just seems like he's having fun with his back and forths, and I never thought I would say this. Like, this is maybe the first and like only time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that humor has been kind of sexy,
Yes.
which is not something I thought I would get from the MCU.
I mean, just the scene where Daredevil is like expressing to her that he can hear her heartbeat is
Yeah.
more sexy than anything in the sex scene in Eternals. You know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
the last time I can remember there being kind of humor and sex is like maybe Iron Man 1, like where
Yeah.
where that was a like kind of leading component. And like and even when Daredevil has a really bad line, there's still something really charming about it. Like the
Hmm.
"my ass remains unwhooped"
Yeah.
is like a real sinker of a joke. Um and kind of lame, but Charlie Cox delivers it in kind of like, I know I'm lame saying this crooked smile that you can't help but be like, that guy is damn charming, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
The at the bar scene where they're drinking appletinis, I think is a really like fun, flirty scene. And I want
mhm.
more of that.
And I think something that also really works that I wasn't sure would was the change in costume. And I know it's sort of based on one of the early comic designs. And as Jen points out, it's a weird combo, ketchup and mustard. But even though it still has those like those closed red eyes, the same way the Netflix suit did on like season 2. Just the fact that you have a kind of contrast between the red eyes and the yellow mask makes him seem immediately more human than when both of them were red. It just seemed like, this like one piece, and I'm sure this is still one piece painted differently. And weirdly, somehow he comes off as more human here than he did when he got his first suit, where you could actually see his eyes, kind of, somewhat. Um, but yeah, again, I think a lot of that is just down to just his charm and his body language too, like the way he walks, the way he leans. He never seems to stand upright, not just when he is Matt Murdock, but even when he's Daredevil, when he jumps off the rooftop, he doesn't walk straight. He kind of like takes this turn, and like it's almost it's almost like halfway between like a jog and a saunter. I don't really know how to put it into words. Just there's something like very interesting about the way he moves.
I have to admit, I laughed out loud when he jumped off the roof, and
Yeah.
there was a whoosh sound effect that they added in. It was just like very cartoonish, and
Yeah.
I appreciated that for some reason or another.
No,
Uh,
at one point, I'm pretty sure they recycled the sound of a pod racer from Star Wars Episode One. When something crashes, I think it's a car or something like that. At one point, there was a very distinctly, oh, that's a pod racer sound.
Oh, interesting. I'll have to go back and check that out. I mean, the episode is very silly,
Yeah.
and I think for the most part, it there are some real funny bits in it, and there are some things that don't hit as much. But like, I feel like the character's charm and the actors really kind of carry it through. Like, it feels like for the first time, Jen has like kind of like an equal match in a partner to kind of like throw banter around with that can match her level, which then sells the
Hmm.
flirtation. Like, Wong was great, but his whole thing is just kind of being grumpy and the straight man,
Yeah.
whereas Daredevil's kind of, throwing the quips back and forth. And I think it made the whole thing like a real breeze and fun to watch. What did you think about Leapfrog? Do you have any history with this character?
I'm pretty sure I've seen him show up in like one odd comic here that I couldn't tell you which one for the life of me. But I enjoyed this take on it because, as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, this whole like spoiled rich kid thing is new. It's for the show, right?
No, actually,
Okay.
I don't know about the spoiled element more than that his father was actually the original Leapfrog. And
Okay.
so he's kind of a kid who got a hand me down costume in the comics and is always trying to like live up to his father. And it puts him in a number of um, like deadly incidents that
Hmm.
usually require other superheroes to kind of bail him out of. So this is not entirely similar to that, but it's a pretty good extension of it. If you want a really good Leapfrog comic, I'd recommend there's an issue of Spider-Man's Tangled Web number 12, actually written by Zeb Wells, the guy who wrote the previous episode of She-Hulk. Um,
Ah.
that really goes into this relationship, and I think is a really great Leapfrog comic. But yeah, I mean, here they make him that he's spoiled. Um, and it's similar enough in the comic in that like he's in the position to be a superhero, but hasn't earned it. He just has like his father's suit with springs in the heels,
Hmm.
which they've turned into jet powered boots here. Um, Although the spring leap pads make an appearance in his like lair, if you will, including the original drawings of Leapfrog are on the side of the arcade cabinets that he's got in his
Oh,
den.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun little Easter eggs in the Leapfrog den that kind of cut back to the Leapfrog from the comics. You know, the Ribbit and Rip It thing I think is meant to be lame, and it came
Yeah.
across as pretty lame. Um, I thought he was a fine kind of like character, but really the Daredevil thing is the start of the show, and this is kind of like the B plot to kind of keep everything going, which I'm totally fine with. It was
Hmm.
fine on that level for me.
Yeah, and I think one place where I felt kind of let down was some of the action. It's typical like Marvel stuff where it like cuts around the impact and like you can't really tell what's going on. Like when some of the hand to hand stuff begins, I thought like when you first enter this dark hallway and you see a door open and you see Daredevil throw someone out of the door, it immediately reminded me of the one take hallway fight scene in season one of the Netflix Daredevil, which I have my issues with because so much of it takes place off screen.
Yeah.
But for a second, I was like, oh, are they gonna like? They had just previously like played like the opening theme of the Daredevil show. And now they're putting us directly in a very Netflix Daredevil esque scenario. So I'm like, oh, are they gonna, do like a one take fight like they've done on like every Daredevil season? But then it was just like the sort of like typical Marvel incomprehensible action, and I was kind of relieved when Jen kind of like stopped the action scene dead.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. I mean, it's a harsh comparison because people hold those hallway scenes up like so high, and
Hmm.
I don't know how much you watched of Daredevil, but like season two then expands on it by having
Yeah.
like a multi-floor fight scene, and then season three has got the jailbreak one
Hmm.
shot episode, which is really ambitious and
It's a whole
really cool.
episode.
It's a
Wow.
whole episode in one shot. Yeah.
Nice. And I'm
Um,
assuming it's digitally stitched together. Like they didn't actually shoot it in one take.
I don't know actually, but however they did it, it's pretty seamless. Like
Hmm.
I don't remember there being visible stitches.
Okay.
But I mean, it's an impressive episode. It's like this very claustrophobic prison sequence that slowly opens up into the grander hallways of the prison to
Hmm.
escaping the prison. So it goes from claustrophobic to like Daredevil being set free. Um, it's a cool episode. I think season three takes a long time to get started, but once it does, it really kind of like is cooking with gas. So uh, if you will, but yeah, it's a hard thing to compare because like you got a show that was defined by doing those,
Yeah.
and then I'm sure they have some B team doing the action here. Um,
I will say though, there was one very small action beat that I straight up loved. I think it's still during the chase where Daredevil's chasing down Leapfrog in his car, and I think Jen tries to punch him, and he falls onto his back
yeah,
like to avoid it, and kips up and keeps running. And honestly, as a wrestling fan, I was like, shit, I'd love to see that in the ring.
well, it's
Um,
definitely a different approach to the character. He's much more of an acrobat
yeah,
here than he was on the show, where he's more of like a street brawler. Uh,
yeah, I like
and
that.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure it has to do with expanded budget and CGI too, because you can get him leaping off the building and flipping around. And boy, am I excited to watch him, shoot his cane and swing through the streets if we can ever get to that day. But you're right, that kind of like dip backwards was really cool.
Hmm.
Not to make this the Daredevil episode, but like so many of the jokes with Daredevil are hilarious, like him bragging that he knows the guy is lying, and the lawyer coming and being like, "Yes, we all know he's lying." You know, like just making
Yeah,
fun of Daredevil's talents, I think is really funny.
yeah, and
So
I've probably said this that Daredevil is, I think, one of, if not my absolute favorite Marvel characters. And so, just from that standpoint, I'm like, yeah, I think this episode does him a fair amount of justice. Um, and I'm excited to see where they go next. But like you said, not to make this the Daredevil episode, even though it's kind of the Daredevil episode.
let's be
Um,
real. You're all
yeah,
coming here for the Daredevil stuff.
yeah.
Do
I'm
you do you have a favorite Daredevil run that you return to? I know you. It
yes.
sounds like you like the kind of more like humorous swashbuckling version of the
Well,
character.
I do, but my gateway into Daredevil, which I still hold very near and dear, it was actually the base, sort of the aesthetic basis for the Netflix show, which I don't like, which was the Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Malev run, which is it's very like it's Coppola esque in that it's sort of like this almost like a family saga, but also there are bits of it that are inspired by like Apocalypse Now, like just the light. I don't know if you would call it lighting, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah, so it is a very like dark and gloomy kind of comic, but it has a propulsiveness to it that I don't think the Netflix shows fully maintained while translating it.
I don't think anybody has ever called any Netflix Marvel show propulsive in their pacing, but
Hmm.
I mean, say what you will about She-Hulk, its pacing moves.
Yes.
There's very little time to get bored with She-Hulk. It'll be over before you know it.
That would be a shame if within the 25 to 30 minutes each week they lost us.
Yeah. I hope that the Born Again is not paced similarly to
Oh.
the Netflix show. I'll even be curious to see how much of that supporting cast comes back.
Hmm.
Are you a fan of the Mark Wade run?
Yes. Yeah. That comes, I think, immediately after the Bendis run, right?
No, there was the Brubaker run, which kind of
Oh,
maintained the tone of the Bendis
right.
run,
Right, right, right. It
and
was sort of a
yeah,
bridge between the two. I have all of that somewhere. So yeah, those I think were the three back to back ones that I read. Bendis, Brubaker, and Wade. And if I'm not mistaken, the Wade one is the much lighter one where he has the "I'm not Daredevil" like
yes,
Christmas or
yes.
Halloween costume. Yeah, I did that one year for Comic Con.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a go-to outfit for
yeah.
Daredevil fans. So
And
bringing it back,
I'd like to just say really quick. I apologize that I don't remember all the artist names. Unfortunately, I read these at a time where I was like, oh, I got to follow this writer and that writer. So
well,
I
I'll
sort
fill
of
in for you.
yeah.
Mark Wade is mostly like Chris Samney,
Yes.
and Javier Rodriguez did a bunch of the issues on that. There's
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of artists on it, but Chris Samney is kind of the defining guy, and
Mm-hmm.
Bendis is Alex Maleev. So there's a whole bunch of them. You've got the Frank Miller run, which is great. So,
Mm-hmm.
but really dark, and it'll be curious to see like where they go, because this Daredevil has a little bit of all of that. But bringing it back to She-Hulk, there's another really great. I'm good. If that's my role as moderator on here,
Wait,
which is to
what's
bring
this
it back to
podcast?
She-Hulk.
What's this
Yeah, right.
podcast about? Decoding Daredevil.
Yeah, right. If we can bring it back to She-Hulk, like there
Yeah.
is this interesting kind of moral question which Matt Murdock poses to She-Hulk, which is to say, like,
Mm-hmm.
She-Hulk can operate, he's basically selling her on the Daredevil model, which is like use the law by day, but use your, vigilante justice by night. I don't know how that works out with a public figure like She-Hulk. Although she does go to some extreme lengths here, that which he makes fun of later. Like during the first fight sequence, she picks up some random car and just chucks it, and then like
Yeah.
later says like I'll leave a note, and it's like how much property damage is she doing here, which he then
Yeah.
makes fun of at the end of the episode. But I was glad to see like that, like Matt Murdock's role seems to be like selling other superpowered lawyers on his brand of vigilante justice. Like
Yeah,
um
the exact line was Jen Walters can use the law to help people when society fails them, and She-Hulk can help people when the law fails them. Which you're right is the Daredevil model. And I'm trying to think who are the other like prominent lawyer characters in the Marvel universe? Are any of them superheroes?
no, not really. I mean, it's really Daredevil and She-Hulk predominantly, unless something is
Mm-hmm.
really slipping my mind. But that seems to be the pair that, like, if they're doing lawyerly crossovers, it's typically like those two. There's other
Mm-hmm.
people within Daredevil's world that have like toyed with it, but nothing as mainstay as these two. It's not like everybody's a reporter is the number one go-to job, or at least like photographer.
Or
You
billionaire.
know, uh, and Daredevil and She-Hulk do get a lot more focus on their work in the comic. You don't get a lot of like full issues of Spider-Man that are just like Peter talking about composition of his photographs. So there is that. Yeah. Anyway, so let's transition here away from the kind of A plot to this like deep C plot that Jen even makes fun of to the camera, saying like, shouldn't this episode be over by now? Like, what's going on here? Oh my God, it's the penultimate episode of the season, which means we got to have some kind of last minute twist to pull you into for the finale. And that's kind of what we get here.
Mm-hmm.
I think anybody could have guessed where this was going, which is the Hulk King slash, uh, what is the group called? Help me out here, Siddhant.
Intelligentsia.
Yeah, the intelligentsia kind of like reappear at the end of this episode. And I got to admit, like, there's some cool stuff here. Like, I like seeing Jen get angry, and I love the kind of metatextual, like, acknowledgement of the hate, like the online haters of the show continuing to advance and
Mm-hmm.
advance to a place I never imagined, which is like slut shaming and revenge
Yeah.
porn.
Yeah.
Like seeing Marvel go into that territory is something I never imagined. I would ever see. Um,
And I think
but
it's interesting that this episode specifically opens with a previously on, like a previously on before the previously on, which is specifically She Hulk twerking and like I think sleeping with someone. So it already
yes.
puts you in that space of like, hey, remember this? Which some people seem to have a problem with. So I think it's an interesting direction to take the show to be like, well, I again I still don't know what the deal is with the Hulk King and all these people, but yeah, they seem really, really nasty and really, really online in an unfortunately realistic way.
Well, that actually brings up an interesting question, which is, was the previously on like added on last minute, maybe based on the reaction of the internet? Because
Hmm.
like it does seem really tacked on in a
Yeah.
really unusual way. Um, and like I could see them being like, maybe we can lean into this a little bit more and make this kind of like from the perspective of the haters and really like zeroing in on all the stuff that seems to have sparked, I tend to think, an exaggeratedly reported on response from
Yeah.
people online. But and anyway, either way, it factors into the end of this episode, and um, I think the idea of this works better than like the actual way that it's incorporated into the
Yeah.
show. Because I kind of am like not interested in all of this ongoing plot stuff. Like
Hmm.
even the date she goes on with the guy that was really interested in She-Hulk feels like this kind of like vestigial tale,
Yeah.
like random inclusion in this episode. Like she literally tells Matt Murdock at one point, like, I gotta call this date quits because I gotta go deal with this subplot. You know, so none of this feels like it really that natural to the show,
Yeah.
even if the thematically it does.
I'm not even sure to what degree it does thematically because like you said, it's interesting that Marvel is going there into like slut shaming and revenge porn. But then I wonder how much does that really connect to the show we've been watching? Like, yeah, we've seen her, try and date, but the show's approach to sex and sexuality seems sort of hermetically sealed from the rest of it. Like, yeah, like her dating life kind of comes up in one court case, but at no point during that court case, correct me if I'm wrong, are there like aspersions cast on her because of her sexuality? Like, there's no one saying like, oh, we can't believe this woman because she's look at what kind of person she is, sleeping around and this and that, which would, I don't know, I guess be more in line with the real perspectives that some people might have with She Hulk or like any woman being promiscuous. Um,
It seems more
but
like a response, like a metatextual response to like a puritanical society that's viewing the show than
yeah,
anything the show is putting forward.
yeah, and even then, even if that was the case, this meta response, um, it like it's sort of this like sanded down version of okay. So the thing that it thinks it's responding to doesn't seem to be what the show actually is. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it's you've had a couple of subplots here and there that are about dating and sex, but nothing to the degree that's like that really brings into sharp focus how She-Hulk really feels about her own body, because like bodily transformation is such a huge part of this, and the extent it goes to is I need to find new clothes. And so
I'll push back a little bit.
go ahead, go ahead.
I think the previous episode with the group where she expressed,
Okay.
the differences, there's a little bit of it there.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do think the show likes to like use the lip surface of real world struggles of feminism when it wants to
Mm-hmm.
get serious without doing the work. Like
Yeah.
especially like you could see it straight away in the first episode where Jen has that like, I can control my anger because I'm used to controlling my anger, without really ever showing us that within the context of the show, or having that be something the show seems interested in other than to use it for that monologue. It's relying on kind of like a like real world understanding of these things affecting women rather than having it be a lived with experience that we saw with Jen, so to
Yeah.
speak. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And, I know I'm probably asking a little too much of this show to say that um, it is a show in which, yes, the main character does have sex, but it's not a show about sex. And yet you have this ending to the penultimate episode that kind of looks back on it in a way that would have worked for a show that had more of a depth of understanding about sex and shame and the way women are viewed when it comes to sexuality in the public eye. Because again, like, this is, it's all up on the screen. It's, it's revenge porn, it's slut shaming, and it hasn't been a show where those two ideas feel connected so far. But again, that's asking a Marvel show to, like, hey, be more about sex.
Well, yeah. We could ask the whole Marvel universe to be more about sex, and I think it would be
Yeah.
a more positive change. But
Hmm.
yeah, you could see many opportunities for it. Like, let's say, for example, like we on one of those dinner scenes with Jen's family, like a puritanical father is like, "I really don't like how
Mm.
famous you've become." And the kind of like sexual escapades that you're engaging in are making us feel ashamed about being your parents or whatever,
Hmm.
right? There's so many opportunities you could really go down that road. And instead, we have to kind of like associate twerking with some kind of sexual exploit.
Hmm.
Um, in a show that's not even willing to show Charlie Cox take his shirt off, right? Like
Oh,
we
yeah.
the only thing we get there is their feet as the door
Hmm.
closes. And I know my wife was really disappointed about that because it was a frequent plus for her to the Netflix show. But yeah, I mean, it is not particularly engaging in anything I would consider radical in terms of like how sex is covered. So,
Yeah.
except for maybe this scene where it gets into
Yeah.
slut shaming and revenge porn, it's
Yeah.
like what the intelligentsia is doing is maybe the most salacious, like sexual statement we've gotten in the show, so to speak.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see, like, where, if anywhere at all, the finale goes with that. Because, I'm look, I'm used to being disappointed with Marvel stuff when it comes to them introducing ideas and not fully capitalizing on them. But also, part of my disappointment stems from the fact that this was the first Marvel thing, maybe ever, maybe in a very long time, that, again, where the sexual chemistry was very palpable. So, which, we discussed early on. So, yeah, it just puts you in a headspace of, like, okay, this is, a show about real people, real adults. They have sexual impulses, which is not something that Marvel wants you to know. Um,
What did
so
you think
yeah.
about her? What did you think about her like hulking out? Because she finally does kind of let her rage. She can't control it, understandably.
Hmm.
Um, Even though I don't quite understand the context of the scene where it happens, like what does revealing her have to do with anything in that particular scenario? Also, the confusion around there being multiple winners of this female lawyer award, which I'm like, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to feel about this. Am I supposed to feel insulted? I don't really know. Are we supposed to be playing off some competitive thing here? But that all plays into what we are to take is her finally slipping and letting her rage go. And like, there's some things I like about this, like kind of the visualization of this, but I also kind of wish it seems like they didn't want to design a new version of She-Hulk because she doesn't like in the comics when she rages out, like it's been depicted that she becomes more like
Yeah.
the Hulk. Like
Yeah.
she looks much like the standard Hulk.
Yeah. The
Um,
Savage She-Hulk, and becomes
right.
very Universal Monster esque.
Yeah, and we definitely there's elements in her face where she looks angrier, but there's no physical transformation. And
Yeah.
I would have loved some of that body horror to be brought
Hmm.
in here a little bit, if
Yeah.
possible.
The voice is slightly different, but not enough to really make a huge difference. But yeah, I get what you're saying, because, and again, this goes back to a problem that I've had with almost every episode. It's that, the scenes of transformation, the scenes of her as She-Hulk, are always disappointing, because, we've talked about this to no end. It's already, like, in the public eye, conversations about the way Marvel operates when it comes to VFX houses and how they aren't given the requisite time. Maybe with more time we would have had something like that. Who knows? Um, but another thing that came to mind is, as we were talking about, the disconnect of that scene. Let me posit a theory. So when we first started this podcast, David said he had heard chatter about this, and I've seen rumors about this online. I don't know to what degree it's true. That the first episode of the show, the one where we have Bruce Banner, kind of on this retreat with her, teaching her to control herself, and she
Hmm.
says, I'm fine. I control my anger more than you, and then she leaves. Again, I can't confirm this. Have heard that it was meant to be the second to last episode.
Hmm.
And the ending that we just saw, I don't know, would that not make more sense as the ending to that episode?
Yeah, it more than her fighting Titania in the beginning of that episode. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I could also see like this being a bridge to a flashback,
Hmm.
like oh, we're seeing her lose her cool. Like, what does that mean for She-Hulk? Let's go back and see how she became this thing.
Hmm.
That seems like such a big change for me to like truly believe it. In the way that a lot of this stuff gets leaked, and it turns out it was just like an earlier draft or whatever. But I could see what you're saying. So to wrap the conversation up, Siddhant Adlaka, um, Hulk King, Intelligentsia, like I don't really have a lot of intrigue built into this plot line, like especially considering it's been a punt, episode by episode, and now it's going to only really make itself like impactful in the final episode. Um, do we think that this is, that guy she's gone on a date with, just kind of flexing his digital power over women um, in a really like unhealthy way, and it's just kind of like the like incel mafia coming after her, or do we think that they're saving it for the end to pull like a Kang reveal where they're gonna have a big bad like big named guy come back in at the final moment, and that's why they've held off this long. Like I said last episode, like I could very well see them. Hulk King is not too far displaced from the leader, right? A ruler in name. He's also kind of a Hulk. Like I could see them pulling something like that.
For a
Because
second, I
Marvel loves
thought
to do that.
For a second, I thought you were being literal, as in like it would be like some variant of Kang, which honestly at this point would make as much sense as them doing the leader. Yeah, I know the leader is like yeah related to the Hulk and all that, and like part of the intelligentsia in the comics. But like, what would be the point? I mean, that's probably what's going to happen. Um, the thing is, like at this point, I don't think this late in the game, I don't know that there's going to be any kind of satisfying answer, just because the intelligentsia and this hulking and all have been such a nothing presence. Like I'm not even sure like to what degree Jen has been even aware of this. Like yeah, Nikki tipped her off about it, but she doesn't seem to really care. She doesn't know that Josh, the guy she went on a few dates on and slept with, she doesn't know that he took her blood.
Yeah.
um and look, the most interesting that this intelligentsia stuff has been is for the zero point 0.8 seconds where I thought the twist was going to be Nikki has something to do with it. Where that's what they
Mm.
seem to want you to think. Like when she pops out from behind, like holding something, it's like, oh, it's just like makeup brushes. Oh, thank God. But like that was when I was like, oh no, they've really screwed us over in a way that I find intriguing. But like, no, that doesn't happen. It's a nice fake out, but it was also the only time they were interesting.
Speaking of the Nikki popping out and making the Wolverine claws,
Oh yeah.
uh, like I think I meant to do some research before we got on the show, but I just didn't have time. Um, I have to. I think they've done that joke before in the Marvel universe, or they've made at least another Wolverine reference at some point, and I'm just forgetting it within the past few
Well,
years.
I know earlier in the show there was a minor reference. There was
Right,
like
there
a
was in
yeah,
the newspaper. That's what it was.
on a
On
website.
online, yeah.
Yeah, a news article about a guy with claws getting into like a bar fight or something like that.
But this is like why else would she do that and make that sound without some kind of like pre-knowledge of the character of Wolverine?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, you could no prize it and write it into whatever you want it to be, but it's kind of funny that they're playing like fast and loose with Wolverine references.
Mhm.
Anyway, any final thoughts on the episode, Siddhant?
So yeah, I think next week we're going to finally learn that the intelligentsia is being run by Wolverine. I think that's what's going to happen. This is where it's all been going. Um, Final thoughts. It was, another fun episode where, again, like this is what almost every She-Hulk episode has been like. Oh yeah, this is fun. I like some parts of this, and an ending that's like, I guess I'll tune in next week.
Yeah, this is probably like my second favorite episode of the show. I think
Mhm.
it would have been a stronger thing if it ended where She-Hulk kind of suggests it should have ended. Just kind of like a fun standalone, like She-Hulk dating flirty with Daredevil. Like it coasts purely on the power of its stars. But
Mhm.
I don't think anything will like outclass episode 4 for me.
I was gonna say, yeah.
If only for the supporting cast of that episode. But
Mhm.
I did have a good time with this, and I think that a lot of that has to do with Daredevil. I must admit, I am a sucker for the Daredevil appearance, and you got me, Marvel. You got me to stick around for 8 episodes for Daredevil.
And look, no, I agree. Like I'm a She-Hulk fan when it comes to the comics. You know this. We've been talking about comics that we've read, and conceptually, I like a lot about the show. But it's kind of unfortunate that the best episodes are the ones where she is overshadowed by someone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Well,
as she keeps saying, it's her show.
and since it's our show, that'll do it for us today on Decoding TV, covering She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, Season 1, Episode 8. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to find more episodes of this podcast, go to podcast.decodingtv.com, where we're also covering Andor and The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, two shows that I think are really fabulous. I'm enjoying them a lot. And if you're enjoying them, you should go check out David's coverage with his various co-hosts of those shows. You can email us at decodingtv@gmail.com. And if you email us your like fanfic of Daredevil and Charlie Cox, I'll send that over to my wife. I'm sure she would enjoy that. So please send us that, your slash fic. And if you want to support the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. We'd really appreciate it. It is, as we said last time, how Siddhant and I get to be a part of this platform. But next week, David Chen will be returning for the She-Hulk finale. Maybe David Chen is the Hulk King. Tune in to find out. I do hope to return in the future, maybe even for the finale. But until then, I'm Dan Gavasdan, and that's Siddhant Adlaka for Decoding TV, and we'll see you later.
Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.